That was the exchange about a month ago between Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Poilievre calling on the Prime Minister to have a televised meeting with premiers within 5 weeks to defend his price on pollution. The NDP and Bloc Québécois backed the motion, and guess what? Well, those 5 weeks are up, but no meeting has been called. The motion was non-binding, though, so Trudeau really didn't have to do it. But should he have done it? Let's bring back the front bench. Saïd Selvam, Gary Marr, Carl Boulanger, and Stephanie Levitt. Saïd, we'll start with you on this one. The Prime Minister really seems to relish those moments when his back is up against the wall. So could this meeting have been a good idea for him?
I don't think so. I think that this would have been a situation where he knows what the outcome would have been, which is likely a hostile meeting in a hostile room. So smart politically on his part to avoid that meeting and also try his best to let the narrative of carbon tax and the negativity around the carbon tax fade as much as possible. But as we're seeing, carbon tax is a very politically charged issue. Tax in itself, especially during a cost of living crisis, is essentially a four-letter word to a majority of the public. So it is a deeply unpopular tax. And, you know, when it comes to meeting with the premiers who have, many of them expressed their ideas about it, he has also dug his heels in and basically said, look, this is not something that's going to change. How politically advantageous that is for him down the road, we'll see. But it's not looking too good right now.
Yeah, Gary, and Trudeau has also issued a challenge to premiers saying that if they have a credible alternative, well, then they should present it. Would this have been an opportunity to call them out all in one room?
I don't think so. And I agree with Saïd that there's no political upside for the Prime Minister doing this kind of a meeting, televised. The last time I remember something of this magnitude being televised, it was Paul Martin saying, "Healthcare is the fight of my life, and I'll stay here as long as needed to make sure that we get a deal on healthcare." This is 20 years ago, and day one was televised. Day two, after having been beaten up fairly badly by the premiers of Canada, the conversation then went in camera at 24 Sussex Drive. So I don't see an upside. I think that Pierre Poilievre has made his point clear, and I think 7 out of 10 premiers have made the point clear that they don't like it. The overwhelming majority of Canadians don't like the carbon tax. I'm not sure that anything of any value would have been established by a meeting like this. But both the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister have made their point clear, and I think it's now up to the public to decide whether or not they agree with the direction that the Prime Minister is taking. The majority of Canadians don't, does Mr. Poilievre have a plan in place? I think that remains to be seen, but remember that it is the job of the loyal leader of the loyal opposition to oppose. It's not his job to say, this is what I would do at this point. There's plenty of time between now and an election for Mr. Poilievre to fully show what his plan is going to be.
Yeah, Steph, plenty of time, but is he running out of time with the public to sort of have some credibility on a credible plan for the environment? That is Mr. Poilievre.
That's going to be a question I think a lot of people are going to be putting to Mr. Poilievre in the coming weeks and months as we head into wildfire season in this country, because I do believe that one of the realities around having a meeting right now on the carbon tax, the Liberals have really struggled to articulate support for the carbon tax as an environmental policy, the risk of doing nothing. We are about to perhaps go through as a nation what it looks like when you don't do enough. And to sort of convene this meeting, I think from the Premier's point of view, so let's take it away from the Prime Minister's point of view, but from the Premier's point of view, in Alberta, in British Columbia, right now as wildfires are beginning to sweep through their provinces, to be getting into a televised argument about a tax when the environment, the country's literally on fire. The optics of that aren't particularly great either, And for Mr. Poilievre, his narrative about technology, not taxes, okay, but let's hear more about that. And let's especially hear more about it when it comes to questions about, for example, EVs and electric vehicles and the subsidies. He talks about wanting to get big government out of the way. So then who's going to fund the technology he's promising? There's a lot of different pieces that remain exposed in his agenda. And again, as we see the wildfire season coming this summer, these questions have more salience because the issue takes on a greater sense of urgency for Canadians.
Yeah, and Carl, to that point, that question of if not this, then what? It doesn't feel like a lot of people have that answer. Wab Kinew, the NDP Premier of Manitoba, says he's looking into it, and he may come up with a plan. But to Steph's point, the conversation really has a completely different backdrop when you consider what's going on in northern parts of different provinces.
And that's true. But if you look at the current polling, inflation and cost of living is still top of mind, which is why this issue is still prominent, and this is why the conservatives are still pushing it. But it may shift as the wildfires, grow and have an impact, like we saw last summer, and in other regions in the country, like in Quebec and Ontario, we hear that it could be a very bad season as well. So that may shift the conversation. Nevertheless, for the Prime Minister, it was a lose-lose proposition. Going in front of the premiers was not going to be good, and now he's stuck trying to defend the fact that he's evading that meeting, and that was possible because the NDP made it happen by voting for that motion, and so the Prime Minister is standing alone on this issue, trying to defend a position that is not very popular, and he's not doing a very good job at it.
Yeah, and Saeed, the fact that he is not really doing a great job of defending it right now, and a lot of people have sort of looked at, the price on pollution. The math doesn't always seem to make sense. How is it that you're taking money from me but giving me money back and more money back? I mean, how much more of a communications issue do they have on their hands to make sure that they're explaining this better so that they come out of this and that they can go into that election with a proper explanation for their price on pollution versus whatever Pierre Poilievre puts in the window?
This is why the importance of timing in politics is so important. To Stephanie's point, which is bang on, we're entering wildfire season. The Prime Minister would have had a slightly, not a slam dunk, but a slightly better time selling the correlation of carbon pricing and carbon taxing to the public and basically say, look what's happening in this part of the country. Look what's happening in the West. Look what's happening in Ontario or Quebec when people start to see cloudy skies and they start to smell smoke in the air, as we did last year, even in parts of Ontario. So I think timing is very important, and that's something that unfortunately the Liberals lost out on. But the other important thing to keep in mind too is tax filing season. So if you were to file your taxes before March 15th, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you'd be getting that carbon price rebate, the carbon tax rebate, as of today, if not within the next few days. So when that happens, it tends to blunt a bit of the issue of the carbon tax and the feeling of it. But again, not totally. This is not something that is going to change the public's mind overnight. Even when it comes to the environment, it's not something that is super top of mind for Canadians right now, given the cost of things like groceries and gas and all that. So still challenging, but I think the timing of the carbon tax introduction was just way off. And that's something that they might have to wear going into the next election.